Hey guys, this episode we are going to talk about refactoring the liking posts episode, which was a long time ago, like 9 years ago, episode number 24, really early on in Go Rails. We're going to refactor this and use Hotwire instead. So this feature looked like this, where we had a like and unlike button, displayed the count of likes and the user avatars. You can customize this however you would like. The way we implemented that was by using these to create.js.erb and destroy.js.erb files. Using jQuery, we would render the partial with Rails, get the HTML, embed it in our JavaScript string, and use jQuery to update the page. And this little partial down here would display the button, and if we were liking, it would make a post request to the create action. If we're deleting our like, it'd make a delete action or delete request to the destroy action in our controller. So we're going to refactor this across a couple episodes and just redo it in Hotwire so you can see exactly how we can really improve this in our Rails apps. So let's dig in and start building. So I'm going to create a new Rails application with the Jumpstart template, and we're going to call it liking posts Hotwire. And that will go ahead and create our Rails app, install, devise, bootstrap, and a few other things. We'll have users ready to go so we don't have to fiddle with that. And we can dig into building our likes functionality. So give me just a second, and we'll be back with a brand new Rails app. All right, so we have a Rails application created. I'm going to CD into that, and then we will create a scaffold for our post model, which will have a title, body is text, and that way we have something to like in our application. And we've already got users, remember that, from the Jumpstart template. So we'll also generate a model for likes, and we want our likes to belong to a user. And then we can have this belongs to a post, or we can plan ahead and make our likes functionality actually polymorphic so we can apply likes to any models in our Rails application. So I'm going to rename this to record and then make it polymorphic to create it. Now, one other thing I'd like to do is go into our migrations and go into our post migration and add an integer field for likes count with a default of 0. This is going to allow us to add a counter cache to our association so that we can keep track of the count of likes on our posts, and they will be automatically updated when a like is added or removed. We don't have to do anything for that, and we can render it out without adding an additional query to our database. So if we go into app models, we can set up our associations. Our post is going to has many likes. Post probably should belong to like the user model for the author, but we forgot that and we'll leave it out because it doesn't really matter for this example. So we'll have as many likes as the record column on the like because we don't have a matching name of post on the like record. And we're going to set this to be counter cache is true. So this is going to then update the likes count on our post whenever a like is created or deleted. And then this will set up the other association to the likes table. And our user can also has many likes. So user can have that association, but it will be direct to this column because it matches. Okay, perfect. So now we need to go and build out our UI for our posts. So our show action.html ERB down here, we want to render out the likes. And what I'm going to do is render out partial for likes, and we are going to pass in locals. So we have local variables, and our post is going to be at post. And then we can make a little file here called likes underscore likes.html ERB for the partial name. And then we can display a button to like that post. And we're going to need some way to reference the post and the like route. So we'll put that in here shortly. And then we'll also have to figure out, what method or whatever else we want in here. But we can then render post likes count directly from the database. And that's going to display 0 by default until we create our first like. So now let's go Rails DB migrate and then run our Rails server. And once that's all booted up, we can go to our Rails app in localhost 3000. I'm going to create a user here, Chris Oliver, chris@gorails.com. Put in my password as password, and voila. So we right now can go to /posts to hit our post route. We can add a post, doesn't matter what's in here, and then we should see our like button and 0. Excellent. So we see that, and we are well on our way to getting this functionality working. So the next step is actually to create a route so that we have the button actually going somewhere, so it can then create or delete the post in our database, or the like in our database. So let's go to our routes.rb file, and under our resources posts, we can add a resource singular for like, and this is going to then add /posts/id/like. And each user will only ever have one like per post, and that's why we want to have a singular resource. They can create the like, they can delete the like, update the like, whatever you would want here as your functionality. And one thing we will do is we will specify a module on here called posts so that this controller ends up under the post namespace in our controllers folder, and that will just help us keep things organized. So if we do that and we run in our liking posts, we can run Rails routes -g, search the word like, and we will find all of our routes for that. And in our previous episode, you might have noticed that we had a create and a destroy action. But both of those, the js.erb files rendered the exact same thing. And this is something that I want to mention because we can change the way that it works in the new version in our refactoring. If we were to use, and let's just go create this controller first. So we'll say posts, and under there, likes controller. We'll add our posts likes controller. This will inherit from application controller, and we will, before action, authenticate user, because we have to have a user signed in. The way this was previously defined was we had a create and a destroy action. And so the create would basically find or create a like for the user and the post. We don't have to really worry about validations because we can either grab the first one in the database or create a new one. And when we destroy, we can search for a user and that post and destroy all of the likes. So if there were duplicates for whatever reason, we could take care of it there. You can also add validations to the like itself so that it validates the record type and the ID and the user ID and says those all must be unique. And you can do that as well. Now, the UI, if you open up the blog post in your browser on your phone and you open it up on the desktop in your computer and you like it on the desktop, but your phone hasn't actually refreshed, it would say like as the button, but you've actually liked it on the desktop. So this needs to be refreshed to see the correct version of the button. And if that button goes to the create action, it's going to then find the like in the database and refresh the page. So what we can do instead is actually consolidate these into just a toggle. So really that's what the button does anyways. It's just toggling the current state on the back end. So the real reason we only need to know that information on the front end in our likes is to display a like or unlike as the button text. We don't need any other information about that on the client side or in the views. So instead of doing a separate create and destroy, we can just use a single update action that updates and toggles the state of the blog post, the like for the blog post for the user. So here we can say set post at post equals post.find params post ID. Because remember, we are in a nested controller, so the post ID, being the first one, has been renamed, and the like will be the one that gets the ID parameter. And basically here we want to see if @post is liked by the current user. And if it is, then we can basically say post unlike the current user. And we can say post is liked by the current user otherwise. And then we can render something to update the page. So this is going to require us to add some methods to the post model. And the reason why we want to go through the post instead of the user is because we already have the post in memory. If we went through the user and it created a like, it would make the callback, but it wouldn't actually update the likes count on this copy of the post that we have in memory. But by going through the post in this manner, it's going to update the likes count and it will be accurate. So it's a little nuance of the way the active record in Rails works that you'll need to know. So we can implement the liked by user, like user, and unlike user methods. And the way we'll do that is pretty straightforward. We'll say likes where user is user, any. For liking, we will say first or create. And for unliking, we can just say destroy all. So in this way, we have applied actions to our likes table that is going to handle duplicates. So if we ever did have duplicates, this will take care of it. It will destroy all of our duplicates. Or if we have duplicate likes, we accidentally call like twice, we aren't going to create a second record because we found the first one automatically. So this is going to protect us from any of those duplicates nicely. We don't have to do anything fancy, but we could, of course, add validations to our like model as well. But that's going to give us this functionality here so that now we can refresh our page, click like, manually refresh, and we want to see that that has adjusted. So if we look at our Rails controller, we want to see that it made that patch request, but we only get a get. We don't have anything that happens for the patch request. That's because we need to go back to our button and actually give it the proper URL. So the proper URL is right here, the post like path that we can point to patch. So if we say post like path for our post and method is patch, this is going to tell the button to go to that route, which is then going to go to this controller and the update action and run this code. So now if we try this out, we click it, we can see nothing happen in the browser, but in our Rails logs, we did make a patch request to the like route and it inserted into there and updated our post likes count. And if we refresh our page, we should see 1. And if we click like again, it goes to 0 because this time it deleted our like and also updated our post count, post likes count. So that is great. That does exactly what we need. And now we need a way for our likes button to actually change the text. And in the previous version of this, we were using an if statement around those two, and we had link tos, and these were also remote as true. So it was using Rails UJS to convert a link into an AJAX request and then make it even more a delete request. And that's okay, but it's better for us to use the button to in the browser because the browser gives you forms and it wants you to use forms for any non-get request. So patch, put, post, delete, it wants you to use a form for that. So that's why we're going to use a button to in this and a method of patch. So now we can also check and say, is the post liked by the current user? If so, we could have the unlike text on here, and otherwise we could have like. And by adding this ternary in here, we get a little conditional, and now we can like, refresh, and if I spelled it correctly, it will say unlike once we've liked it. So that works pretty well, except we have to manually refresh the page still. So now we're creating our likes and undoing it, and we can just click it as many times as we want and it will work, but we need to see some feedback. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a tag.div and use the Rails helper to generate a div in our HTML, and we'll give it an ID. And our ID is going to be this DOM ID, and we'll give it the post, and we'll prefix the word likes onto that ID. So this will convert the variable, the record in our database, to the model name underscore the ID. In this case, it might be like ID number 1. And then it's going to put a prefix on there of likes, and this will be the string that it generates. So that little DOM ID generates an ID like this. It will put that as the ID in our HTML, and we can inspect the page. If we refresh, you'll see around the form, likes post 1. Perfect. So that gives us a target. We can use that in our likes controller, and we can have a response for our update action. We can do that in 2 places. We can either do that here in the controller and render a turbo stream, or we can do that in a turbo stream view under our likes controller in the views folder. But I'm going to do this here, say respond to do format dot turbo stream. And then that way we don't have another file, but also this will make it a little bit more reusable for other things in a future episode. Okay. So to do this, we need to render a turbo stream format, and that is going to use the turbo stream helper to execute an action. And there are a handful of actions that you can use: append, prepend, replace, update, remove, before, after, and you can also write custom ones as well. The one we care about is using replace. So if we say replace, the first argument here is going to be that DOM ID for our post, and then likes, and then we can tell it which partial to render, and it will use that partial, render it, and then find that DOM ID on the page and replace that exactly the same. And all this code might start to look pretty similar because we're going to have the same partial, we're going to have the local post in there, and we want our controller to render that out as well. So if we change this or paste that in, we have partial likes, locals, post. That is going to render out a partial named likes. But this isn't going to find the exact same partial because we are now nested. Instead of on posts, we're under post likes as our controller name. So it's going to look for the file posts / likes / underscore likes.html.erb if we do this. So that's not what we want. We need to actually specify posts / likes specifically to match the same one that is rendered here. Now we can also change this to post likes, which will be redundant in this file because it's already in the posts controller and the post folder, but we can make them match exactly by doing this, and that's kind of nice. So then that way it's consistent throughout there. So this replace action will generate a response on the server, which is this little HTML snippet. It's going to have the replace, it's going to have that DOM ID as a target, and the HTML from that partial will be inside of a template. And then when this gets added to the page, some JavaScript in Turbo for Turbo Streams will automatically see this, see the operation of replace, know what to do with it, and it will update that on the page. So we don't have to do anything here. We just click unlike, and it will execute that, but it will blow up. And that is because DOM ID is not something you can use out of the box in your controllers. There's 2 options for this. You can say action view record identifier.DOM ID and call that method directly from the module, or you can include the module in your controller. And that will give you access to the method like normal, like you see in your views. So if we refresh page and fix that error and click like now, you'll see that immediately this updates accordingly. So we see that it goes and displays like and unlike and flip-flops it depending on if you have liked it or not. So that's awesome, and that works exactly how we want it to without any custom JavaScript. So all of that jQuery dependencies that we had here, all of that is gone. We don't have to do any of that. We've also removed our if statement, sort of, and consolidated that button into a single button. So we don't have two like and unlikes. They actually are just that single entry here. Now, one of the things that we're doing is we're putting an if statement now inline. I would prefer this to be inside of a helper instead. So I go into helpers and I would say likes helper.rb, and we would make a module called likes helper, and we would have a method called like button text for a record. And it's going to be the one that knows, well, if you give us a record, we know how to render either the word like or unlike. And we can then take this code. I'm going to grab this, copy it to my clipboard, and we'll say like button text for the post. And we can paste this code in here. And instead of using the post variable, we'll call it record so that it's more generic. And we can ask the record if it's liked by that current user, and then we can use like or unlike. And we can even go as far as using translations here as well. And so we can make these, use the I18N functionality, and then we can have this translatable in our little helper. The logic is in our Ruby code instead of our HTML now. And our HTML is just a simple button to with the like button text, and it knows how to toggle it. On the server side, it doesn't need to know anything about that. Just the likes helper does. Okay, so if we refresh, everything still works, and we have a very nice option here for that. So lastly, this also rendered out user avatars of whoever have liked that post. So if we go into this, we can also go in and say post likes includes user. So we can preload those users or eager load them. And we'll have our like, and then we could render out an image tag. And we have an avatar path helper method from Jumpstart that you can use. We can say like user, and it will automatically generate a gravatar URL for us. So if we go into avatar helper, here's the code for that. You give it an object, it will see if it has an avatar attached to it. So if you have an avatar through active storage, it will use that. Otherwise, it checks to see if it responds to an email. And if it does have an email, then it will use gravatar and use MD5 to generate the URL for that. Otherwise, it will use the default URL for a missing person on gravatar. So here we can also say size is 20 to match the size of the avatars that were on our previous episode. And there we go. We get our user. We have an extra little equals in our HTML. So we'll get rid of that here. And now we have everything working just like before. You, of course, have to style this a little bit. You'll probably want to add some CSS in here and say like class dflex or whatever the Bootstrap one is to make it display flex so it's all in one line. But I'll leave that CSS up to you in order to implement that. But yes, we now have the exact same functionality implemented using this one awesome TurboStream piece of functionality. We've also refactored that custom DOM ID that we created ourselves in the previous episode. We have that now being using this DOM ID helper that Rails has always had, but I didn't even use or maybe even knew about in this episode back then. We had, if you look at this, we generated the ID automatically by writing it out. So that wasn't the best way to do it, but it worked. So now we have a much simpler likes feature, but I want to take this a step further and add a refactoring here so that we can take the likes controller and everything else that we've done and extract it so that we can use this across comments and projects and any other model that you might need in your application. You could add likes to photos or videos or whatever models you have. So we'll do that in the next lesson, but this is the quick way of refactoring into using Hotwire instead of jQuery and all that old js.erb functionality that we had previously. We're not using any of that anymore. We're just using all the awesome stuff that Hotwire gives us with Turbo and Turbo Streams.